Ichika is a worthless loser who enrolls in an all-girls school to lose his V card. However, everything changes when he becomes the pilot of an overpowered mecha suit, and now every girl in school wants to crack him to gain power. It all begins when Ichika is freaking out in class, as he realizes that he's the only male student transferred to the Infinite Stratos Academy, which is a school for training young warriors to fight in battle suits, called Stratos. Out of desperation, Ichika tries to call out his old friend, Hoki, but she turns away from him, making him think that everyone now hates him. When the teacher asks him to introduce himself, he says his name, but then notices that all the girls are staring at him anxiously like the last pizza slice at a frat party. To impress them, he says a TikTok pickup line, but his negative riz makes all the girls faint from disappointment. As he wonders what he did wrong, his sister, Chifu Yu, suddenly arrives and formats his monkey brain with punches for being an airhead. But he's confused by why she's there because he has no clue what she does for a living. Chifu Yu then introduces herself to the class as the homeroom teacher, who will teach them how to pilot their suits, and all the girls in class start jumping in excitement and glazing her because she was Japan's representative in the first ever Stratos pilot competition. She then starts bullying Ichika for calling her Wani-chan instead of sensei, and this makes some girls suspect that their blood relationship is the reason Ichika is the only man who can pilot a Stratos. After silencing the class, Chifu Yu announces that she'll make the students memorize all the basic fighting techniques within half a month, after which they'll train themselves, and all the students support her plan. After class, Hoki asks Ichika to meet her on the roof for private talk. As they catch up, Ichika drops a riz bomb by pointing out how pretty her hair looks, causing her to blush, but their flirting is interrupted when the bell rings for the next class. During class, Ichika is freaking out again because the words in the textbook look like Harry Potter incantations to him. So the teacher, Maya, asks the class if they don't understand the lecture, but everyone stays silent because Ichika is the only one there with fewer brain cells than a wet sock. Noticing this, Chifu Yu asks Ichika if he read the compulsory reference book before enrolling, but the dimwit reveals that he misplaced it, so she smacks him in the head and orders him to memorize the extra copy she'll make for him in a week. Hours later, a blonde baddie suddenly approaches Ichika and starts acting sassy towards him, but Ichika says he has no idea who she is, so she introduces herself as Cecilia, the representative of England who placed first in the entrance exam. However, Ichika showcases his cluelessness once again by revealing that he has no idea what a representative contender student is, so Cecilia explains that it's an elite student chosen to represent their country as a Stratos pilot, and calls him a dumb fool for not knowing that much. Cecilia then starts bragging about defeating an instructor during the entrance exam, which is a near impossible feat, but Ichika gives her the shock of her life by revealing that he has well slimed an instructor. Soon after, Ichika arrives at his new dorm room, and he's impressed by how fancy it looks, but suddenly, Hoki walks out of the shower, wearing just a towel.
Wow! Beautiful!
And they both freeze in shock when they see each other. When she asks what he's doing there, Ichika explains that he was sent there to be her roommate. But Hoki suddenly grabs her kendo sword and tries to destroy his danglers, so he runs outside to save himself. However, some desperate hoes surround Ichika and start begging to have a taste of his eggplant. So he begs Hoki to let him back inside until she finally opens the door. When she finally calms down, Hoki suggests that they set up specific times to use the bathroom. But the fool starts yapping about how he'd rather use the single bathrooms downstairs where the girls are, so she scolds him for being a weirdo and tries to attack again. To defend himself, Ichika grabs a kendo stick, but they notice that her plot covers are on top of it, so she snatches them and knocks him out. During class the next day, Chifu Yu announces that they have to elect a class representative who will participate in the upcoming inter-class tournament, and all of Ichika's fangirls nominate him without hesitation. Before Ichika can refuse, Cecilia aggressively objects to the motion and challenges Ichika to a duel, where he'd become her slave if he loses. Ichika agrees and offers to give her a handicap, but everyone laughs at him because in the current era, girls are known to be way stronger than boys. Out of concern, a girl begs Ichika to take back his words, but he refuses, claiming that a man should never do that. So Chifu Yu makes their duel official. Chifu Yu then informs Ichika that the academy will have to take some time to make him a personal suit because they don't have a spare one for him, and this makes all the girls jealous because it's rare for a first-year student to get a personal suit. Ichika wonders why it's such a big deal, but Cecilia suddenly moves in front of him and starts bragging about how she already has a personal suit, which is one of the elites among the 467 Stratoses that exist in the world. Hearing this, Ichika is surprised by the small number of Stratos suits left. So a girl explains that the technology for the core of the Stratos suits has never been disclosed to the public, and all the suits left in the world were built by Dr. Tabana, who is actually Ho-Ki's elder sister. Chifuyu explains that only government personnel can be given a personal Stratos, but given Ichika's special circumstances, a personal suit will be prepared for him for the sole purpose of data collection. A lady asks her if Tabane is related to Ho-Ki, so she reveals that it's her elder sister, and this makes everyone freak out and pester Ho-Ki with questions about her whereabouts since she's been missing for a while now. However, Ho-Ki angrily tells them it's none of her concern since Tabane isn't her, so they all shut up, but Ichika wonders if she and her sister are on bad terms. During class, Maya explains that the Stratos suit encloses the pilot's entire body within a special barrier, and there's mutual understanding between the pilot and the suit, which is developed over time, but as usual, Ichika's two brain cells can't piece together what she's saying. Maya then tells them to think of their Stratoses as partners instead of equipment, but a student catches her off guard by asking if she means lovers, and this makes her blush like a K-drama girl while the students make fun of her. Ichika is still worried about Ho-Ki, so he approaches her after class and invites her to have lunch with him, along with several other of their classmates, but she refuses. However, Ichika grabs her hand and tries to tease her into accepting his offer, so she shoves him to the ground. While getting back up, Ichika praises her for being better at martial arts, but she jestfully calls him weak, and the other girls back away because they don't want to hang out with two battle junkies, so Ichika asks Ho-Ki to follow him, until she finally agrees. At the cafeteria, Ichika tells her to lay off the salty attitude because he's trying to be nice to her as a show of gratitude to her and her parents, who helped him out a lot in the past, so she finally calms down and thanks him. While eating together, Ichika begs Ho-Ki to teach him about the Stratos so that Cecilia won't wipe the floor with him. But before she can respond, a baddie shows up and asks Ichika to let her train him for the upcoming duel. Ho-Ki tells her to back off since she's already been chosen to be his teacher, but the girl argues that she'd be a better teacher. So Ho-Ki reveals that she's the sister of the legendary doctor, which makes the desperate simp finally give up. After their first sparring match, Ichika is gasping for air like a worn-out racehorse, but Ho-Ki is disappointed that the moron has become as worthless as Sakura in battle, so she decides to ditch the Stratos lecture and coach him in martial arts for 3 hours after school every day instead. Days later, Ichika asks Ho-Ki why she's only been giving him training lessons instead of teaching him about Stratoses, so she reminds him that his Stratos hasn't arrived yet. Suddenly, Maya informs Ichika that his personal Stratos is ready, and Chifuyu explains that he'll have to use it without any rehearsal because the arena is only open for a couple of hours. Once they unveil the suit, Ichika is stunned that it looks more majestic than a Power Rangers Megazord, and Moa introduces the Stratos as Byakushiki. When he mounts the suit, a bunch of control screens appear in front of him, and Moya informs him that Cecilia's Stratos, Blue Tears, is a long-range shot-type Stratos, which makes him concerned. After bidding Ho-Ki farewell, Ichika flies over to the battleground, where Cecilia offers to forgive him if he gives up and apologizes, but he refuses, so she fires a blast, which knocks him to the ground. Before he can recover, Cecilia starts spamming energy beams at him, and he realizes that his shield energy is running low, so he digs through his inventory and picks out a sword to face her. Cecilia overwhelms him with even more attacks and calls him an ignorant fraud for thinking he can defeat her with a long-range type Stratos with a sword. However, Ichika maneuvers around her attacks and destroys some of her blasters before pointing out that her weapon can't move until she issues a command every time. Seeing this, Maya is impressed that Ichika is already better than Iron Man at piloting robot suits, but Chifuyu tells her not to get her hopes up because he's been opening and closing his hand, which he usually does when he's about to make a basic mistake. As Cecilia fires more blasts at him, Ichika destroys her blasters and gets up close, but she suddenly blasts him with some missiles, which makes everyone fear for him. However, when the smoke clears, the girls are surprised that Ichika's Stratos has evolved, and Cecilia can't believe that he's been fighting on default settings this whole time. In his inventory, he finds a mecha sword named Yukihira, which Chifuyu once used. So he equips it and declares that he'll protect Chifuyu's name by proving himself as a strong younger brother. Enraged, Cecilia fires some missiles at Ichika, but he slashes through them and charges in to finish her off with a slash. However, before he can land the attack, Chifuyu stops the duel and announces that Cecilia is the winner. When he asks Chifuyu why she gave him the L, she explains that he unknowingly used a barrier nullification attack, which is Yukihira's special attack, capable of dealing direct harm to opponents. This dropped his shield energy to 0, which automatically means he lost the duel. On the way home, Ho-Ki blushes while asking Ichika to let her train him, and he immediately agrees, so she tells him to meet her after school the next day. The next day, all the students gather in the yard to practice Stratos piloting, and Chifuyu picks Ichika and Cecilia to give a demonstration, so Cecilia transforms into battle mode. However, when Ichika tries to do the same, nothing happens. So Chifuyu calls him a fraud while explaining that a skilled Stratos pilot only takes a second to transform, and this gives him the motivation he needs to finally manifest his suit. Once Chifuyu gives the go-ahead, both pilots take to the skies, but Chifuyu complains that Ichika is moving too slowly because Byakushiki's output specs are more impressive than what she's showing. However, Ichika finds it hard to imagine a pyramid in front of him like the manual instructed, but Cecilia explains that he'll have a much easier time if he finds a more constructive way to move around. Despite this, Ichika complains that the suit is too heavy to fly in, but Cecilia suddenly goes into simp mode and offers to give him a private piloting lesson later on. However, Chifuyu interrupts by instructing them to demonstrate a nosedive to a complete stop. Cecilia does this easily, but when Ichika tries, he loses control and crashes into the ground like a Looney Tunes character. Seeing this, Hoki and the teachers rush to check on Ichika, and after confirming that he's fine, Chifuyu scolds him for leaving a hole in the training ground, so he apologizes. Hoki yells at him as well for being trash despite their training, but Cecilia suddenly shoves her out of the way and rushes to check on him. Ichika confirms that he's okay, but the blondie still asks to escort him to the infirmary because she secretly plans to give him a sloppy toppy. However, Hoki interrupts and reminds her that it's impossible for someone to get hurt while piloting a Stratos, and the two baddies start bickering over the dense fool, who doesn't even know they want him. During lunch period, the girls celebrate Ichika as the new class representative, but he doesn't understand how he got the position after losing, so Cecilia explains that she decided to turn the position over to him because she regrets getting angry at him prematurely. As the other girls sing praises to Ichika, Hoki starts acting salty, but some girls from the school newspaper show up and take a picture of her and Ichika. The leader of the group, Kaoru, then asks Cecilia to hold Ichika for another photo, so she cheerfully holds his hand as they pose together. But all the other girls crash into the photo, which makes her angry. The next morning in class, a girl informs Ichika that Class 2 has a new transfer student from China, and this makes him worry that she could be a threat in the interclass tournament, but another girl assures him that she'll be a piece of cake since only classes 1 and 4 have personal Stratoses. However, the China representative in question, Rin, suddenly arrives and introduces herself to them before declaring war on their class. Apparently, Ichika knew her beforehand, so he teases her for acting like a cartoon villain, and she tries to scold him, but Chifuyu suddenly knocks her from behind and tells her to leave so she can begin class. During lunch, Ichika asks Rin why she's still on bad terms with Chifuyu, so she explains that they're very different people. As the chef serves their food, Ichika points out that she's still obsessed with ramen, and the two of them talk about old times while the other girls stare in confusion. While eating together, Rin asks how Ichika managed to activate a Stratos during the entrance exam, so he explains that the entrance exam took place at a multi-purpose city hall, where he ended up getting lost. Since the staff weren't around to help him find his way, he walked around aimlessly and eventually entered a room which had a Stratos. Once he touched it, the Stratos started glowing, and the staff who showed up to stop him were completely amazed that he activated a Stratos. When he's done narrating this to Rin, Cecilia and Hoki angrily walk over to Ichika and ask if Rin is his girlfriend, but he explains that she's his old friend who transferred to his old school right after Hoki left. He then introduces Hoki to Rin as his original homegirl, and this makes her happy, so she cheerfully exchanges greetings with Rin. Cecilia proudly introduces herself to Rin, but Rin straight up ignores her and asks Ichika to join her in pilot training later on. Hearing this, Hoki and Cecilia argue that Ichika should be training with his own classmates, but Cecilia says it's none of their concern since she's his close friend who made him meals after school in the past. After school, Ichika and Hoki gear up in their Stratoses to begin training, but Cecilia demands to join them and transforms as well. After hours of training, Ichika is lying exhausted on the ground, and the girls troll him for being out of shape, so he reminds them that it was 2-on-1. Shortly afterwards, Ichika is chilling in the locker room, but Rin suddenly arrives and hands him a drink and a towel. While blushing, she asks if he has something special to say to her after years of not seeing each other, but Ichika can't read a room to save his life, so he asks her to watch Steel Ball run and speaks of his plans to go to meet Hoki in his room. Hearing this, Rin accuses him of being Hoki's sugar daddy, but he explains that they're just old friends who share a room together, and she claims that she's okay with it since they're just friends. However, she storms into their room with her bags and asks Hoki to switch rooms with her, and Hoki refuses, but she ignores her and starts flirting with Ichika. Enraged, Hoki tries to attack with her kendo stick, but Rin transforms her arm into a gauntlet, allowing her to block the attack. Rin then asks if Ichika remembers the promise they made several years ago, but the airhead says a load of garbage, so she slaps him and challenges him to a match at the tournament, where the loser will do what the winner asks. Days later, everyone gathers in the arena for the interclass tournament, and Ichika is surprised that he's facing Rin in the first round. When he flies to the arena, Rin reminds him that the absolute barrier isn't perfect, because a powerful attack can break through and hurt a pilot. But he says he doesn't care and charges in to face her. Rin dodges his attack and tries to split him in half with her sword, but he blocks with his sword, causing her to praise his battle skills. She then summons a second sword and charges in with an even more powerful attack, and Ichika manages to block, even though he's fighting for his life. Seeing this, Ichika's two biggest simps worry for him, and Cecilia screams at the screen like a frustrated football fan, asking Ichika to use a special technique she taught him. Meanwhile, Rin combines her two swords into a deadlier weapon and launches a series of combos, and Ichika dodges while planning to get some distance so he wouldn't spend all his energy defending. However, Rin suddenly fires a blast, which stuns him, but he manages to dodge it anyway, so she laughs and sends him to the ground with a stronger blast. Cecilia can't comprehend what she just witnessed, so Maya explains that Rin's attack is called a shock cannon, which can fire shells by exerting pressure on space directly, and this makes Cecilia realize that Rin's suit is third generation, just like hers. As Ichika struggles back to his feet, Rin spams more shock cannon class at him, and he manages to evade them, so she compliments him once again before revealing that her dragon cannon's barrel and shells are both invisible. However, Moya notices an even more serious issue, which is that Rin's shock cannon can fire at any angle, meaning that it has no blind spots. While sidestepping the blasts, Ichika realizes that he'll be cooked if he doesn't attack, and he's desperate to prove his worth, since he's using his sister's original weapon. Several days earlier, Ichika summoned the Yukihira sword and asked Chifu Yu if it was all Bai Kushiki had in its arsenal, and she responded that it was all he needed to win, before giving him specific instructions on how to use the sword's attacks. However, her words fried his miniature brain, so she advised him to focus on perfecting one move and reminded him that he's her younger brother. Now in the present, Ichika plans to use his nullification barrier, so he tells Rin that he's attacking for real this time, but she claims that she's in a different league, and attacks once again. As Ichika runs away from her, the girls notice that he's planning something, so Chifu Yu explains that he intends to use the ignition boost attack she taught him, which is a surprise attack where he accelerates at top speed to approach the enemy. She claims that he'll be able to match Rin if he uses it at the right time, but adds that the skill only works once. After several minutes of evading Rin's attacks, Ichika finally charges in to make his move, but suddenly, a blast breaks through the school barrier and interrupts the fight. Moe confirms this, so Chifu Yu announces that the duel is suspended and orders everyone to evacuate. All the stands start closing up, but Ichika doesn't know what's going on, so Rin informs him that the match has been suspended and asks him to return to the pit. However, Ichika notices through the system that an unidentified Stratos has entered the premises, so he asks Rin to escape with him, but she insists on buying time while he runs away. Ichika argues that he can't leave a girl behind, but Rin reminds him that he's the weaker fighter among them and assures him that the teachers will soon arrive to handle the situation. Suddenly, the enemy fires a blast at Rin, but Ichika swiftly flies in and saves her, and he notices that the enemy Stratos has a beam weapon with higher output power than Cecilia's. Seeing that she's being carried like a Disney princess, Rin gets flustered and asks Ichika to drop her, but the evil bot suddenly fires a blast at them and reveals its terrifying form, making them realize that it's not a Stratos. As Ichika tries to interrogate the robot monster, Maya asks Ichika to evacuate with Rin, since the teachers will soon be on their way, but Ichika refuses, as he's determined to hold off the enemy until the teachers arrive. Concerned, Maya and the girls beg him not to, but Ichika refuses to listen, and the evil droid attacks them with a barrage of laser blasts, but they dodge the attacks easily and agree on a plan where Rin keeps the monster occupied while Ichika charges in with his sword. Following this, the dynamic duo clash fiercely with that monster inside a dark cloud, and Moya starts calling out to them out of concern, but Chifu Yu asks her to trust them and offers to make tea for her to calm down. However, Chifu Yu ends up putting salt instead of sugar into the tea, making them realize that she's scared as well. Cecilia asks for permission to help them with her Stratos, but Chifu Yu drops the unfortunate news that the evil robot has damaged their system so much that they can neither evacuate nor aid them. On the battlefield, Rin distracts the monster bot with a barrage of blasts and gives Ichika the signal to attack, but when he does, the machine dodges, so Rin scolds him for being worthless. As the dark bot overwhelms them with blasts, Rin says they need a strategy to beat it, so Ichika asks her to evacuate, but she refuses because she's determined to prove her worth as a cadet representative. Hearing this, Ichika decides to support her, and this makes her blush, but the dark bot starts spamming hollow purples at them once again, so Ichika asks her to focus. Ichika notices that the machine isn't being piloted by a person since its movements are mechanical, and this makes him confident that they can win since he can go all out without thinking too much. After some motivating words from Hoki, Rin blasts Ichika with her cannon, giving him enough energy to charge in and slash off the evil droid's arm. However, the dark bot punches him to the ground and prepares to finish him off, but Cecilia suddenly comes in clutch by blasting a hole through the monster bot. As they start celebrating, the dark robot suddenly respawns and charges a powerful blast at them, but Ichika charges head-on through the blast to defeat the monster. Hours later, Ichika wakes up in a hospital bed, where Rin informs him that the droid has been defeated, and he was the only one who got injured. Rin then reveals that she returned to her country because her parents got divorced, so Ichika asks her to hang out with him sometime, which makes her celebrate until the other two ladies arrive and start bickering with her. Meanwhile, Chifuju and Maya do some experiments on the Evil Stratos, and find out that it's being powered by an unregistered core. Some days later, Ichika is playing Nintendo games with his friend, Dan, who teases him for being the only guy in his school, but Ichika tells him to knock it off and says he's happy that Rin enrolled, since there weren't many people he could talk to. Just then, Dan's sister, Ran, shows up to call him for breakfast, but when she notices that Ichika is getting a glimpse of her plots through her outfit, she gets flustered and hides behind the door. Dan tries to warn her to knock next time, but she scolds him for not telling her about Ichika on time, so he apologizes. As Ichika eats breakfast, Ran tells him to relax and enjoy in a calm voice, and he realizes that she's changed, so he asks her if she's now cracking a frat boy, which she immediately denies. Later that evening, Maya informs Hoki and Ichika that it's time for Hoki to move to another room, which they prepared for her, since it's awkward that she shares a room with the opposite gender. She tries to object to the motion, but Ichika proves to be denser than a rock, as he tells her not to worry about him, and this makes her so annoyed that she decides to leave the room that night and walks away angrily. Minutes later, Hoki returns to the room and tells Ichika that he'll have to date her if she wins at the interclass tournament, and this shocks Ichika, but the nosy journalists around pick it up as a big scoop. The next day in school, all the girls start gossiping about the agreement between Ichika and Hoki, but when Ichika asks what they're talking about, they lie that it's Demon Slayer. Just then, the teachers arrive and welcome a transfer student, who introduces himself as Charles and explains that he decided to move there after finding out that there was another guy in the school. All the girls immediately start celebrating because they now have a fresh eggplant to chase, but Chifuyu shuts them up and instructs them to assemble at Ground 2 for a combined training session with Class 2. She then asks Ichika to help out Charles since they're both boys, and Charles approaches him for an introduction, but he suddenly grabs his hand and runs away with him. As they make their way to the boys' locker room, an army of thirsty hoes surrounds them to get a taste of their whipped cream, but Ichika leads Charles away from them and explains to him that they're being chased because they're the only two guys who can pilot a Stratos. They soon arrive at the men's locker room, where they cheerfully introduce themselves to each other. Seeing that they're running late, Ichika hurriedly takes off his shirt, but Charles suddenly turns away like a sissy and tells him to look away while he gets changed. By the time Ichika turns his head, Charles has already finished changing, so he asks if Charles is secretly a Power Ranger, but Charles says he's just fast at wearing clothes. Ichika notices that Charles is wearing well-designed sportswear, so Charles explains that it's a product from the Dunois company owned by his father, which is the largest French company in that Stratos business. But Ichika says he isn't surprised, since Charles has been giving Nepo baby vibes since he arrived. During the training class, Chifuyu calls Cecilia and Rin out to showcase their abilities, but they start complaining like lazy bums, so Chifuyu motivates them by reminding them that it's their golden opportunity to win Ichika's heart. As she tries to introduce their opponent, Maya suddenly flies in, wearing a Stratos suit, and crashes into Ichika. When the smoke clears, they see that Ichika is grabbing her cushions.
Yeah, boy.
And even though it's clearly an accident, Cecilia and Rin both try to destroy Ichika with brutal attacks, which he manages to dodge. When they've calmed down, Chifuyu informs them that their opponent is Maya, and they're surprised that it's a 2-on-1 battle, but Chifuyu promises them that they'll lose in no time. Once the duel begins, Cecilia fires a flurry of blasts at Maya, but she dodges easily, so Rin blasts some energy beams, which she also dodges. Chifuyu then asks Charles to give a description of Maya's Stratos, so he explains that it's a Dunois model named Raphael Revive, which matches the specs of the third-generation suits despite being the last of the second generation. After a heated clash, Moya ends up clapping both Cecilia and Rin with a powerful blast, and the two airheaded girls start arguing over who was the weakest among them. So Chifuyu tells them to show the teachers more respect moving forward. She then orders the students to split into groups, and all NPC girls immediately start begging to join Ichika's team. But this annoys Hoki. When Ichika does a roll call, the first girl introduces herself as Kyoka, and all the other desperate hoes beg him to work with them as well. After training Kyoka, he calls for the next girl, who turns out to be Hoki, but she complains that she can't get into the machine in its current state. So Maya asks Ichika to give her a lift in his Stratos form. Hearing this, all the girls freak out, and Hoki's face turns red from embarrassment, but Ichika nonchalantly carries her into the machine, so she asks him to have lunch with her. Ichika agrees, and this makes her happy. But during lunch period, she's annoyed to see that Ichika has brought their entire friend group to hang out with them. Seeing that Hoki is salty, Charles asks if it's okay for him to be there, and Ichika says it's fine since they'll be living together from that day forward. So Charles thanks him with a warm smile, which makes him blush. Cecilia then invites Ichika to try her sandwich, claiming that it's better than anything Gordon Ramsay ever made, but once he eats it, his face turns purple because of its diabolical taste. Seeing this, Hoki offers him some of her food, and when he tries it, he loves the food so much that he glazes her for several minutes and even feeds her some of the food, causing her love rivals to freeze in shock. Later that evening, Ichika and Charles are chilling in their room, and Ichika explains to Charles that he trains with his Stratos intensely after class, so Charles asks to join his training. The next day, Maya introduces another new student named Laura, who transferred from Germany, and all the girls start gossiping about her because she's low-key giving Hitler vibes. Suddenly, Laura smacks Ichika in the face and tells him that she'd never acknowledge him as Chifuyu's brother in a million years. Hours later, the girls are trying to teach Ichika how to move like Jackie Chan in his Stratos suit, but he can't understand their yappings, so Charles asks him to have a training match. Once the duel begins, Ichika and Charles clash weapons, while the girls watch cheerfully. Ichika charges in to slash Charles with his sword, but Charles swiftly dodges and fires several bullets at Ichika, which he blocks using a shield until his energy depletes. After the match, Charles explains to Ichika that he can't win because he doesn't understand the nature of long-range weapons, and he guesses that Ichika's capacity is being used up by his one-off ability called Reiraku Bakuya. Hearing this, Ichika cheerfully compliments him, saying that his lectures are easy to understand, but the three dumb baddies start ranting about how Ichika was too dumb to understand their advice. Charles then hands Ichika his gun to use for practice, but Ichika doesn't understand how he can use someone else's weapon. So Charles explains that the weapons from his company Stratos can be used by any registered person after he unlocks them. As Charles helps Ichika stabilize the gun, Hoki complains that they're starting to give rainbow flag vibes, but Ichika accurately shoots down all the targets that appear and tells Charles that his gun feels really fast. Just then, Laura arrives in her majestic dark Stratos and challenges Ichika to a fight, but he refuses, claiming that he doesn't have any reason to and asks her to wait for the interclass league match. However, Laura suddenly fires a powerful blast at him, but Charles dashes in and blocks the bullet before scolding the Terminator baddie for being short-tempered. While pointing his gun at her, Charles ragebaits her by bragging about how his Stratos is more mobile than her third-generation German Stratos, but Chifuyu yells at them through the radio for causing a commotion, so she backs away. Hours later, Charles arrives at the boys' dressing room to check on Ichika, and Ichika confirms that he's fine before thanking him for saving his life. Charles then decides to return to the dorm, but Ichika starts pressuring him to have a shower with him, so he gets flustered and runs away. While walking home that evening, Ichika remembers Laura smacking him in class, and he sees her having a dramatic conversation with Chifuyu, so he hides in the forest to eavesdrop on them. Laura begs Chifuyu to return to Germany and instruct her people again because she can't use even half of her powers there, and she feels that the students there aren't worth teaching. However, Chifuyu delivers emotional damage by telling her to stop feeling like Gojo Satoru when she's just a one-eyed brat, and instructs her to return to her dorm, so she angrily walks away. Chifuyu then calls out Ichika for eavesdropping and asks him to go do some training instead, since he's on track to lose the first match of the tournament. As she walks away, Ichika stops her and asks why Laura said she'd never acknowledge him, but Chifuyu tells him not to worry because it's all in the past. Apparently, Ichika was kidnapped on the day of the second Stratos tournament finals, and he was tied up in prison until Chifuyu withdrew from the tournament and saved him. Since everyone believed that she'd win the tournament, her forfeit caused a huge uproar, and she returned the favor to Germany, who sent her Ichika's location by spending a year in the Stratos division of the German military. Ichika feels that it's all his fault for being a worthless younger brother, so he decides that he will not let Chifuyu protect him all the time. When he returns to his dorm room, he enters the bathroom to give Charles some soap, but he's shocked to see that Charles has a ripe pair of melons and a cookie.
Wow! Beautiful!
So he moves away. After the bath, Ichika tries to calm things down by serving Charles some tea, but he slips and the tea spills on his hands. As he washes his hands, Charles tries to help, but her cushions press against his arm, causing him to freak out.
I'm gonna come.
When he asks Charles why she pretended to be a man, she reveals that it was a direct order from her father, and drops a bigger bombshell, informing him that she's not his actual daughter. She didn't initially live with the Dunois family, but but after she lost her mother, they came to take her. After performing several experiments on her, they realized that she had a high aptitude as a Stratos pilot, so they made her an unofficial pilot, but Charles barely ever saw or spoke to her father. Shortly after that, their company went into crisis because the second-generation models, which they were known for, were outclassed by the third-generation models, so Charles was ordered by her father to enroll into the academy as a boy to steal the data from Ichika's suit. After explaining all this, Charles apologizes for lying to him, but Ichika suddenly starts ranting about how parents maltreat their offspring, and he reveals that he and Shifu Yu were abandoned by their parents years ago. He then asks Charles what she'd do, and she explains that she'd be called back to her country since her true identity has been revealed, but Ichika tells her to stay at the school and promises that he won't tell anyone about her secret. Rose suddenly turns into Saul Goodman, as he proves that her father can't do anything to her by reading out a rule in the school regulations, which states that students who enroll belong to no country or organization, which means that Charles is safe for the next 3 years. Charles is surprised that the pea-brained idiot could memorize all 55 rules of the school, and thanks him for helping her, but the moron is distracted by her dangling melons.
Yeah, boy.
So she calls him a cultured loser. Suddenly, Cecilia arrives to check on Ichika, so he hides Charles under the sheets and pretends that he's sick, but Cecilia randomly decides to take Ichika out to dinner. On the way, they run into Hoki, who forcefully joins them on the date. After the dinner date, Ichika returns to his room and hands Charles the dinner he got her, but he notices that she's struggling with chopsticks, so he decides to get her a fork. Charles tries to refuse, so Ichika advises her to depend on people more, and she takes advantage of this by making him feed her. Meanwhile, Laura is on a roof somewhere, and she takes off her eye patch to reveal her Sharingan eye before swearing that she'll destroy Ichika for hindering his sister. The next day in school, Kyoka tells her friend group about a rumor, which says that the winner of the upcoming tournament will get to go out with Ichika. When Cecilia asks if he knows about it, Kyoka says he doesn't because it's something the girls decided to do on their own, but Charles suddenly arrives, so the busybodies run away. Hours later, Hoki is standing by the balcony, wondering how her desperate romantic move on Ichika suddenly turned into a Champions League tournament for his sausage, and decides to win no matter what to make up for an incident that happened when she was younger. Back then, she was on her way to win the national kendo competition, but she lost by default because she was forced to attend her sister's status presentation instead. People became concerned about the Stratos' potential as a weapon, so her family was forced to relocate constantly for their own protection. But by the time Hoki woke up, her parents had separated, and her sister was missing. Hoki was emotionally drained by the constant spying and stalking, but she continued practicing kendo anyway because she believed it was her sole connection to Ichika. However, on a certain day, she was defeated by a disgusting loser because all she could think of was beating down her opponents to relieve stress. Now in the present, she realizes it wasn't true strength, and she decides that she'll win this time to overcome the weakness that lies within her. Meanwhile, Cecilia and Rin arrive at the training grounds and decide to have a duel to determine who is the stronger one among them. After several minutes of trash-talking each other, the two baddies finally transform into Stratos mode to throw hands. But before they can begin, Laura makes a dramatic entrance by blasting at them. Rin asks what her problem is, but she laughs at them because their stats are lower than she anticipated, so Rin starts throwing shades at her home country. However, Laura claps back by reminding them that their countries are more worthless, and this makes them enraged, so she invites them to attack her at once. As Ichika and Charles walk through the hallway, some girls run ahead of them and inform them that 3 girls are having a WrestleMania match in the arena, so they rush to see it. When they arrive, they see Laura wiping the floor with both ladies, and Rin tries to fight back with an impact cannon blast, but Laura blocks easily with a force field. Ichika can't believe his eyes, so Charles explains that she just used a powerful third-generation technology called an inertial stopper, but Ichika still decides to have faith in his girls. Rin fires even more blasts at Laura, but Laura blocks with her energy shield again and grabs her with dark tentacles. As Laura insults her, Cecilia spams blasts of her own and forces Laura into a closer range, where she fires a cannon blast at her, which Laura counters with a cannon blast of her own. Laura then slams both girls to the ground, and Rin tries to fight back once again, but she shoots her down easily. However, Cecilia suddenly fires a missile at short range, which catches Laura off guard. The girls are confident that their attack did damage to Laura, but when the smoke clears, they see her aura farming like Piccolo, and she uses her dark strings to drag them into close range, where she starts pummeling them. Seeing this, Charles and Hoki fear for their lives, because they know their Stratos shields won't be able to take much more damage, and Ichika begs Laura to stop, but she smiles mischievously at him, so he transforms into status mode and breaks through the barrier to fight her. As he charges in, Laura stops him with a barrier and claims that he's a pathetic fraud who can't measure up to her before pointing her gun at him to finish him off. However, Charles saves him with a rain of bullets, allowing him to grab Cecilia and Rin and fly them to safety. Laura then pulls Charles closer to her using her dark threads and tries to smite him using a blade of light, but Chifu Yu suddenly arrives and blocks her strike with a sword. She explains that she could no longer ignore the fight since the Academy's barrier was broken and asks them to continue the fight at the tournament. So Laura powers down her suit. After giving Ichika a stern warning, she announces that all duels are prohibited until the tournament, before dismissing them. Hours later, Rin and Cecilia are resting in the hospital after getting patched up, and Ichika and the others are keeping them company. Suddenly, a swarm of girls arrives and shows Ichika a new rule for the tournament, which states that everyone will now have to participate in pairs. Like desperate call girls, they beg Ichika to pick them, but Ichika shatters their dream of bedroom pole dancing by deciding to pick Charles instead. Despite this, Cecilia and Rin beg Ichika to choose them, but Maya suddenly arrives and informs them that they can't participate in the tournament due to their injuries and damaged Stratoses. However, they communicate via SIM Bluetooth and decide that Charles would be the best option to win instead of their female opponents, so they promise to root for their team. When they return to their dorm room, Ichika tells Charles that she doesn't have to speak like a boy when they're alone together, so she switches to lady mode and asks him to stay inside while changing, since going outside would make people suspect them. At this, Ichika decides that they should turn their backs while changing together, but they both slip, and Ichika ends up grabbing Charles's cakes by accident, causing her to kick him away. On the day of the tournament, Ichika and Charles are getting ready, and they see a panel of men who have arrived to scout third years and monitor the improvement of second years. Charles advises Ichika not to get too emotional during the upcoming fight because Laura is the strongest among the first years, but when the fixtures arrive, they're shocked to see that Laura has been paired with Hoki. Minutes later, Team Ichika and Charles are at the arena, having a stare-down with Team Laura and Hoki. And when the match begins, Ichika charges in with his sword, but his attack is blocked by Laura's shield, making everyone conclude that he's cooked. She then points her gun directly at Ichika, but before she can fire, Charles appears behind Ichika and fires a blast, which forces her to back away. As Charles spams bullets at her, Hoki suddenly arrives and blocks his attacks with her shield before knocking him away with her sword. Hoki charges in to attack Charles again, but Charles and Ichika do the old switcheroo, allowing Ichika to clash blades with his sword Mami. However, Laura suddenly pulls Hoki away and tosses her into the ground so she can face Ichika herself, and Hoki charges in to face Charles, but she forces her back with rapid-fire bullets and apologizes that she's not facing her boy toy instead of him. In the control room, Maya points out that Ichika's team plans to take Hoki out first, and Chifu Yu explains that it's a smart plan because Laura is currently fighting without taking her partner into account at all, while the other two are coordinating really well. On the battlefield, Charles fires some blasts, which make Hoki's suit overheat due to a lack of shield energy, after which he joins Ichika to face Laura. Ichika then transforms into his Super Saiyan mode, and as Charles keeps Laura occupied, he jumps in to finish her, but she jumps back to avoid him. She then activates her shield again and points her gun at him, but Ichika reminds her that he's part of a team, and Charles blasts her from behind, successfully harming her in the process. Seeing this, Chifu Yu explains to Maya that the team realized Laura's defense is only a bootleg version of Gojo's Infinity, since it can only block things she's actively focused on. As Charles overwhelms Laura with bullets, she takes to the skies to avoid him, but Ichika meets her there to land his finishing attack, only for his shield energy to run out before he can make impact. With renewed confidence, Laura then forces Charles back with her dark threads and slashes Ichika to the ground. As she moves in to destroy Ichika, Charles punches her away and spams her with bullets, but she can't block this time because she has no data on the ignition boost technique he's using, so she reveals that it's her first time using it. Before she can activate her barrier, Ichika blasts her with a brutal backshot using Charles's assault rifle, and she retaliates by knocking him away with her dark tentacles. But Charles uses a powerful attack called Shield Piercer to shatter her barrier and launch her into the ground. Seeing this, everyone in the crowd starts celebrating, and Charles delivers several more brutal attacks to Laura using the shield piercer, making her realize that she's about to lose. She remembers how she was brought in as an experiment subject for the German military and trained to fight until she became outstanding. Eventually, the Stratus was invented, and a nanomachine was implanted into her eye to enhance her compatibility, but her body didn't fully adapt, so she was labeled a failure until she met Chifu Yu, who was an extremely talented drill master. With Chifu Yu's help, Laura rose again above her peers in the Stratos unit. One day, Laura asked Chifuyu why she was so strong, and she said it's because she had a younger brother. But Laura didn't like the wholesome look on her face because she wanted her to always look strong and dignified. Fueled by hatred, she begs the nanomachines in her left eye to give her unrivaled strength, and this turns her Gundam suit into a dark cloud, which swallows her. Seeing this, Chifuyu orders the other officials to trigger the alarm for a level D crisis, so it's announced that the tournament is suspended, and the students are evacuated from the arena. Meanwhile, Laura's suit turns into a dark mode version of Chifuyu's Stratos, so Ichika decides to face it, but the dark Stratos claps him in seconds, using his own sister's techniques. Ichika is enraged that the monstrosity is ripping off his sister's moves, so he charges in to take revenge, but Hoki holds him back and tells the idiot to think of his life. In the control room, Maya asks why the dark Stratos isn't moving anymore, so Chifuyu explains that it's an automatic program that only reacts to weapons and attacks. As Ichika struggles to escape, Hoki slaps him back to his senses, but he's still annoyed by the fact that the dark monster is using his sister's sword and techniques, so she reminds him that he can't do anything because his suit is out of power. However, Ichika says he has to do something, and Charles proves to be the ultimate bro once again by charging his Stratos up with energy. Seeing this, Moya wonders what they're up to, but Chifuyu orders her to put the teacher units on standby and leave the battle to them. When Charles is done charging Ichika's Stratos watch, he summons his Stratos sword, since that's the level of power the charging device can muster. Like a true Gigachad, Ichika promises his Snow Bunny that he'll win the fight and goes into his full attack mode once again to face the monster. As the dark monster attacks, Ichika unleashes a powerful slash, which splits the monster apart, freeing Laura from its grasp in the process. In the dream world, Laura sees a vision of Ichika promising to protect her, and when she wakes up, Chifuyu informs her that her Stratos was loaded with a system called a Valkyrie Trace system, which could take over her consciousness when she wishes for it. Meanwhile, Ichika and Charles are having dinner together, and Hoki suddenly arrives, so he tells her that he'll fulfill her earlier request to go out together. This makes her happy, but when she asks for more details, the idiot says he only wants to go shopping with her, so she kicks him like a soccer ball before angrily walking away. Just then, Maya arrives and informs Ichika and Charles that they can chill at the men's bath since they won the tournament. As Ichika rests in the bath, Charles suddenly arrives with her melons on full display. So Ichika tries to leave, but she calls him back to listen to her. She then tells him that she's decided to stay in the school because of him and rubs her plots on his back.
I'm gonna come.
While asking him to call her Charlotte since it's the name her mom gave her. The next day, Maya introduces Charlotte as a new student, and all the students wonder if Charles has suddenly decided to follow Bruce Jenner's footsteps, so she explains that it was a girl all along. When they realize that Ichika has been chilling with a girl all this time, Hoki arrives to annihilate him with her Stratos suit, but suddenly, Laura blocks the attack with her shield and kisses him. As everyone watches in shock, Laura tells Ichika that he now has to become her spouse, and everyone in class screams in shock. Sometime later, Hoki calls her sister, Tavane, who informs her that her personal Stratos has been completed, and it's an exclusive model with top-notch specs named Aka Suwabaki. The next morning, Ichika wakes up, and he realizes that someone is sleeping next to him, so he immediately pulls up the sheets, only to see Laura wearing her natural bathing suit. When he asks what she's doing there, she explains that it's normal for married couples to sleep on the same bed together in that manner, so he tries to caution her, but she suddenly puts him in an arm lock. Just then, Hoki arrives to call Ichika for training, and when she sees them in that freaky position, she gets enraged and restructures Ichika's brain with her kendo stick. Hours later, Ichika is riding on a train with Charlotte, complaining about the hell he went through that morning, and when she asks why he only invited her, he explains that he decided to bring her along for his swimsuit hunt because he knows she doesn't have female swimsuits. During their talk, he accidentally calls her Charles, so she scolds him and reminds him to call her Charlotte instead. They soon arrive at the station, and Charlotte says she'll forgive Ichika if he holds her hand. So he fulfills her request and asks her to keep holding on to prevent her from getting lost. However, they have no idea that Rin and Cecilia are spying on them from afar, and they're so shaken up by the hand-holding that Rin summons her gauntlet to destroy them, but Laura suddenly arrives and tells them of her plans to blend in with the two of them. Rin explains to her that she has to gain information on them first before making a move, and Cecilia adds that they have to find out how they're related first, so Laura agrees to follow their plan. As they move ahead, Ichika tells Charlotte that he has to think of a special way to address her since everyone now calls her Charlotte, and this shocks her, but he decides to go for the nickname, Char. This makes her so excited that she starts imagining both of them as a telenovela couple. But they soon arrive at a spot in the mall where Ichika asks her to go ahead of him because he plans to buy something else. In another part of the mall, Dan and Ran are walking together, and Ran starts yapping about all the OnlyFans content she plans to do with swimsuits, but Ichika suddenly arrives, causing her to shrivel away in embarrassment. When Ichika asks what they bought, Dan reveals that his sister bought a whole bunch of spicy swimsuits because she wants to show them to him, but Ran kicks him away and asks Ichika if he's there to buy a swimsuit as well. After he admits that he is, she informs him that she'll be his cowhide the next year since she's enrolling in Stratos Academy, and he wishes her good luck, so he thanks her. Suddenly, Charlotte grabs Ichika and takes him to one of the dressing rooms, where she tells him that she wants to show him the swimsuits that she bought. As Ichika tries to respond, she signals him to be quiet and looks outside the curtain, only to see that the other girls are searching for them. She then starts taking off her uniform, and Ichika turns back to avoid the glorious sight of her plots, but his rotten mind keeps showing him cultured images of her. When she's done changing, she calls him to see her outfit, and once he sees it, he's so stunned by her beauty that he can barely muster up words.
Wow! Beautiful!
However, Chifu Yu hears his voice from the outside, so she opens up the curtain and asks what they're doing. Minutes later, Maya scolds them for breaking the school rules, and the other girls see this from their hiding spot, so they decide to stay there to keep themselves safe. Meanwhile, Laura calls her subordinate named Clarissa and tells her that she needs directions in picking a swimsuit hot enough to charm Ichika since the school's beach trip is coming up. When Clarissa asks what she's currently equipped with, Laura reveals that she only has a single school swimsuit, so Clarissa scolds her and explains that she'll never be able to show off her hourglass body figure with that gear, before assuring her that she has a secret plan. Days later, the students arrive at the beach for their trip, and Maya instructs them to return to the inn during evening hours so they won't be late for dinner. Rin and some other girls start pestering Ichika, but Cecilia suddenly arrives and lies down on a mat, where she asks him to apply some sun lotion to her back. After pouring the fluid on his hand, he tries to get started, but Cecilia suddenly screams and asks him to warm up his hands before getting started. After following this order, he uses all of Diddy's secret techniques to apply the lotion to her back, and loves the feeling so much that she begs him to apply the fluid to her cupcakes. However, Rin uses the sunscreen to tickle her instead, and Cecilia turns to scold her but accidentally gives Ichika an eyeful of her bare plots. So she knocks him out with her mecha fist. Shortly afterwards, Ichika and Rin are chilling in the ocean together, and Rin tries to swim away from him, but her leg suddenly gets cramped up, causing her to sink into the ocean. Seeing this, Ichika swims faster than Aquaman and successfully saves her, making her fall even deeper in love with him. After confirming that Rin is okay, the other girls drag her away, but Cecilia suddenly arrives with Laura wrapped up like the mummy because she's too shy to show Ichika her swimsuit. When Cecilia gives her some words of motivation, she finally showcases her baddie swimsuit, so Ichika praises her looks. Following this, Ichika and the girls play a game of beach volleyball together, but Laura is distracted by thoughts of Ichika cracking her in bizarre positions, so she gets nailed in the face with that ball. As Ichika checks on her, she gets flustered and runs into the sea to cleanse her mind. Just then, Chifu Yu arrives with Maya, and they join the students in playing around the beach together for several hours. Later that evening, Chifu Yu meets Hoki on a cliff and informs her that Tabani might show up the next day since it's June 7th. Hours later, everyone enjoys dinner together, but Ichika notices that Cecilia is struggling with her legs while sitting in the Japanese style, so he offers to move the table. However, she says she's fine because she'd rather lose her legs than give up the opportunity to sit beside her crush, and Charlotte explains that he has to let her be because women are different from men. Despite this, Charlotte is still fighting for her life at the table, so Ichika offers to feed her the same way he fed Charlotte earlier, but Charlotte suddenly covers up his mouth to stop him from revealing more of their private affairs. Cecilia suddenly goes full simp mode and begs him to feed her so that the food won't go to waste. So Ichika feeds her some fish, but all the girls around start hating on her. However, Chifu Yu suddenly arrives and scolds the students for causing a nuisance before warning her brother to control his Sigma energy. After she leaves, Ichika tries to beg Cecilia to eat by herself, but she stares at him like an angry chihuahua, so he invites her to come to his room later, which makes her excited as she thinks he's finally about to pet her kitten. Hours later, some girls from Ichika's fan club are frustrated that he's not around to play with them since he's currently holed up in Chifu Yu's room, but Cecilia is dancing cheerfully and preparing for their midnight arrangement. When Kaoru takes a close look at the things she's preparing, she notices that Cecilia is packing some spicy plot covers, so all the girls force her yukata open and confirm that she's indeed wearing one of Victoria Cakes' best gears. They all accuse her of being a lady gooner, but she lies that it's just for appearance, so they finally let her go. As she walks through the hallway, she sees the other girls hiding at the door of Chifu Yu's room, and they signal her to be quiet so they can keep listening. The sounds from the room make it seem like Ichika and Chifu Yu are practicing some Alabama techniques from Game of Thrones together. so the cultured girls lean in to listen properly, but the door collapses, causing them to fall inside. However, Ichika was only giving Chifuyu a massage, so Chifuyu scolds them for breaking in and suggests that they all get massages from Ichika since he's very good with his hands. Ichika chooses Cecilia to go up first, so she excitedly hops on the mat, and as Ichika massages her back, she starts to fall asleep until Ichika accidentally grabs her peach,
Yeah, boy.
which catches her off guard. To make matters worse, Chifuyu raises her yukata to reveal the saucy peach protectors she's wearing and starts teasing her for it until she begs her to stop. Chifuyu then sends Ichika to get her a drink, and after he leaves, she pops open a can of beer and asks them what they like about him. Hearing this, the girls cheerfully ask if she plans to hand him to them, but Chifuyu refuses and tells them to improve themselves so they can snatch him themselves. Minutes later, Ichika is walking outside, and he sees Hoki staring at a weird object in the ground with a sign asking for the object to be pulled. But when he asks her about it, she nonchalantly walks away. When he pulls the item from the ground, a giant mechanical carrot suddenly lands in front of them, and Tabane pops out of it to greet Ichika. She then asks him where Hoki is, but before he can respond, she unveils a new invention of hers called the Hoki Tracker, which, as the name implies, allows her to track Hoki. After she leaves, Cecilia asks Ichika who the lady was, so he informs her that it's Hoki's elder sister, causing her jaw to drop to the floor. Hours later, Chifuyu gathers Ichika and the girls in a training spot, claiming that they all have personal Stratos suits, but Rin points out that Hoki doesn't have a training suit. Before Chifuyu can make things clear, Tabana suddenly crashes into the scene and tries to cuddle Chifuyu, but Chifuyu pushes her away, so she starts pestering Hoki until Hoki sends her flying with a punch. Following Chifuyu's instructions, Tabana introduces herself to the girls as the genius scientist, but they find it hard to believe that the Senku of their world is a playful moron, so she proves it by summoning Hoki's personal Stratos from the sky. She explains that its specs surpass all of theirs because it's a 4th generation Stratos she made herself, and they're all surprised that she's already made a 4th generation, when the 3rd generation is still being tested in many countries. After opening up the Stratos, they ask Hoki to get in, and once she does, Tabana inputs all the new data into it before asking her to fly in it. Once she takes off, all the girls are shocked that she's moving faster than a Kryptonian in the sky, and Tabane asks Hoki to test out the machine's katanas as well. So she fires some slashes that blow right through some clouds, leaving her stunned. Tabana then fires some missiles at her while asking her to try out her sword against them, and she effortlessly slashes through them, which impresses everyone around. Just then, Maya arrives and informs Chifuyu that there's a special mission that needs to be dealt with urgently, so she tells her team to quit the training and prepare for the mission instead. In the control room, Chifuyu explains to them that an American-Israeli joint developed a 3rd generation Stratos on the Hawaiian coast called the Silverio Gospel, but it suddenly went out of control 2 hours ago and became an unmanned Stratos. Since the Silverio Gospel is drawing closer to the school, the students are tasked with going after it and neutralizing it. Cecilia then asks for the specs of the Stratos, so Chifuyu shows her some info screens, which reveal that it's a special shooting type Stratos that specializes in long-ranged combat, which makes it similar to her Stratos. Chifuyu then points out that they have only one chance to approach the rogue Stratos since it's moving at supersonic speeds, and Maya points out that they have to defeat it with one blow, so Rin decides that they'll end it with Ichika's finishing move, Reiraku Bakuya. However, the moron starts complaining, so Chifuyu reminds him that it's a real battle and not training, so he decides that he'll do it to prove his strength to her. When Chifuyu asks which Stratos is fast enough to catch the rogue bot, Tabana suddenly jumps into the room and suggests that they test out the Aka Suubaki. Soon after, Hoki gears up in her Aka Suubaki form, and Tabana starts bragging about all the powerful weapons she built inside of it. Afterwards, Chifuyu announces that the mission will begin in 30 minutes and asks them to prepare for it. When it's time for the mission to begin, Ichika and Hoki both transform into their battle modes, and Ichika reminds Hoki not to be careful since it's not a drill, so she assures him that she'll be cautious and asks him to relax so she'll carry him properly. Ichika asks if she's so confident because of her new personal Stratos, but she claims that it's how she's always been and tells him to carry out the operation calmly. Just then, Chifuyu contacts them and reminds them that the key point of the mission is to settle the matter in one blow by attacking either the Silverio or the Gospel. Hoki then asks if she should support Ichika in responding to the situation, and Chifuyu gives her permission to do so, but advises her not to exert herself too hard since she doesn't have any real battle experience with the Aka Suubaki, so she promises to back him up any way she can. Hearing this, everyone is surprised that she's acting more excited than usual. So Chifuyu uses a private channel to warn Ichika that Hoki is about to make a blunder because of her excitement, and she instructs him to support her when she does. When the mission begins, Ichika gets on Hoki's back, and she dashes away at high speed, leaving everyone amazed that her Stratos is capable of blitzing Prime Minato. Chifuyu then shares the live location of the target using Google Maps, so Hoki boosts her speed even more until they finally spot the Silverio Gospel. Hoki informs Ichika that he'll make contact with the enemy in 10 seconds since she's about to accelerate again, so he summons his sword and goes into Reiraku Bakuya mode. As he charges in for an attack, the Silverio Gospel spots him and swiftly dashes away, so he moves in for another swift slash, but the Gospel dodges once again and spams missiles at them. While evading the missiles, Ichika tells Hoki to charge in from the left for a combo attack, and so she charges ahead and overwhelms him with her machine's weapons before giving Ichika the signal to attack. However, Ichika notices that another enemy is moving towards the school, so he rushes over to face it, but the Silverio Gospel takes advantage of their distraction by firing a barrage of bullets, which overwhelm both combatants. Chifuyu yells at Ichika for fumbling their best chance at victory, but he informs her that there's a poaching ship headed towards them. As the Silverio Gospel rains more attacks on them, Hoki asks Ichika to ignore the ship since they're just criminals, but he refuses, claiming that he can't let them die and deflects all the blasts headed in their direction until his sword shuts down. Hoki angrily calls him an idiot for protecting criminals, but calls her into the astral dimension and asks her why she's now looking down on weaker people ever since she became stronger. He claims that it's not like her at all, and this makes her so emotional that she drops her sword and starts crying. But Ichika notices that she's out of energy as well. Suddenly, the Silverio Gospel fires some missiles at her, but Ichika rushes in and uses his body as a shield to protect her, causing them to fall into the ocean. In the control room, Maya notices that Ichika and Hoki aren't moving, so she asks if headquarters wants them to cancel the operation, but Chifuyu decides that they'll continue the mission until Ichika and Hoki call it off themselves. Just then, Charlotte knocks on the door, but Chifuyu tells her and the other girls to remain in standby as she ordered, and Laura tells them to obey her orders. However, Charlotte claims that Chifuyu is worried about Ichika as well since she's his sister, but Rin informs her that she hasn't checked up on him ever since she gave the order for his treatment. Cecilia also brings up the fact that she didn't talk to Hoki at all during the rescue and claims that she was too cold, even though the mission failed, so Laura explains that she's doing her job by focusing on capturing the gospel. She guesses that Chifuyu is confining herself to the meeting room because she's indeed troubled by Ichika's condition, but she also knows that worrying about Ichika won't solve the problem. In the hospital room, Ichika is unconscious and on life support, and Hoki is drowning in guilt as she remembers the talk no jutsu Ichika gave her when she was talking like a comic villain on the battlefield. Hoki questions why he wants to forgive people breaking the law and protect them, but she realizes that it's what makes him strong. She has flashbacks of how she fought during the mission, which makes her realize that she was only blindly following power, and she feels like a fraud since Ichika sacrificed himself to save her and the poaching ship. Just then, Maya arrives and advises her to take a rest since everyone is worried about her, but she insists on staying by Ichika's side. So Maya informs her that Chifuyu ordered her to do so, causing her to finally leave. Minutes later, she runs a marathon on the beach until she loses breath, and she has a flashback where she was being badmouthed by a chopped, overweight loser, until Ichika stepped in and sent the fool flying with a Detroit smash. A while later, she asked him why he did things that could cause him trouble later, but he told her that he delivers knuckle sandwiches to scumbags that deserve it, and her up by saying her outfit looked good. As he walked away, Hoki called him back and told him to call him by her given name, so he smiled while telling her to call him by his first name as well. Now in the present, Hoki stares at the bracelet she's wearing until Rin suddenly arrives and reminds her that it's her fault that Ichika is in his current condition. Hoki is too depressed to respond, so she grabs her shirt and gives a passionate speech to motivate her to fight back, but Hoki says she'll never use a Stratos again. However, Rin slaps the piss out of her and tells her to stop acting like a cowardly brat, so she gets back up and declares that she'll take on the enemy. This makes Rin and the other girls happy, and they tell her that they as well feel the same way since they don't want things to end in defeat. Laura then shows them the live location of the gospel and informs Rin that she had to track it with satellites since it's currently moving in stealth mode. All the girls confirm that they're done with preparations, and they ask Hoki for her plans, so she swears that she won't lose this time. Soon after, Laura fires a massive shot at the gospel, and Maya asks Chifuyu to call the girls back since they're defying orders, but Chifuyu says she expected this to happen. The gospel blocks their blast with a shield, so Laura fires a barrage of bullets at it, but the gospel evades all of them at light speed and charges at Laura, only to get knocked away by Cecilia. Cecilia then fires her own energy beams at the gospel, but it dodges as usual, so Charlotte ambushes it with a flurry of blasts. After dodging all the attacks, the gospel fires back, but Charlotte blocks with her energy shield and tells it not to underestimate her. In the world of Ichika's consciousness, he sees a girl in all white, who tells him that she has to go because something is calling her. Meanwhile, the girls finally manage to land a solid hit on the Silverio gospel, and Cecilia is happy about this, but Rin tells her it's not enough, so they continue firing rapid blasts at the machine. At the same time, Ichika's dream world changes to a scene of the evening sky, and he sees a Stratos asking him if he desires power. Back on the battlefield, Hoki attacks the gospel with her swords, but it tanks her hits and grabs her swords, so everyone advises her to leave the swords and retreat. However, as the Silverio gospel prepares to finish her off, she summons an energy sword and knocks it into the water before assuring Laura that she's fine. Suddenly, the gospel charges out of the water and transforms into its second form, which has glowing white energy wings, causing the girls to tremble in fear. In Ichika's consciousness, the robot spirit asks Ichika why he wants strength, so he explains that he simply wants to protect his companions from all the violence in the world. Just then, the white spirit girl appears once again and grabs his hand while telling him that he has to go. Meanwhile, the gospel fires a Kamehameha blast, which knocks Hoki out, and Cecilia tries to run away from it, but it chases her down and traps her in an omega-sized version of its wings, which knocks her down as well. The White Terminator then blasts Charlotte with a powerful energy beam, and as Hoki lies unconscious on the ground, she wishes that her Prince Charming, Ichika, would come for her. Her prayers are immediately answered, as Ichika arrives in full gear and tells her that he can now fight once again since his injuries have healed. With tears in her eyes, she thanks the heavens that he's okay, but he hands her a ribbon to tie her hair into its usual style and wishes her a happy birthday before flying off to battle. In the control room, Maya is freaking out because they've lost communication with the team, so Chifu Yu explains that Ichika and the girls cut it off from their side. As Ichika attacks the gospel, Maya is shocked that he's using Byakushiki's second form, named Setsuna, and Ichika uses Setsuna's shield to block the swarm of bullets that the gospel fires at her. The gospel opened fires at Hoki as well, causing Ichika to worry for her, but she assures him that she's fine and maneuvers around the evil droid's blasts. As the Mecha Avengers assemble in the air, all the girls assure him that they're ready for a counterattack, so he confidently charges in at the gospel again. Suddenly, Hoki notices that her energy is completely transformed, and her Stratos, Akasuubaki, has activated its one-off ability called Kenran Buto, so she flies in to support Ichika. Moya notices that Ichika's energy is reaching critical levels, but he still tries to power through the enemy's attacks until he gets overwhelmed. However, the girls arrive to save him, and Hoki transfers some chakra to him, which refuels his energy tank before telling him to surpass his limits like Yame. Following this, Hoki clashes blades with the Silverio gospel and gives Ichika the signal to attack, so he charges in, but the rogue machine suddenly blasts her away and overwhelms Ichika with attacks, so he tells Laura to give him cover. As Laura fires away at the gospel, Ichika charges in to attack, but it dodges and sends her packing with a rain of light beams. However, Cecilia arrives and overwhelms the white droid with attacks of her own, so Hoki tells Ichika to finish it off, but the defiant gospel suddenly unleashes a larger barrage of light bullets, which force the girls to retreat. Ichika then tackles the gospel to the shore and uses his energy sword to break through its shield, and the Silverio gospel finally shuts down. Hours later, Chifu Yu scolds the team for defying orders and informs them that they'll be undergoing special training as punishment, but Maya reminds her that they're all exhausted, so she praises them for defeating the gospel and tells them to take the rest of the day off. Later that evening, Tabana is on the beach, rewatching the highlights of the gospel battle on Amazon Prime, and she's shocked that Byakushiki was able to regenerate and heal the pilot. Chifu Yu suddenly arrives and reminds her that it's the first machine Tabane devoted herself to creating before narrating how Tabane set everything up to make Ichika the wielder of the Byakushiki. She then points out that Tabana set the whole gospel scenario up herself to allow her sister to make a proper debut in her new gear, and calls her a genius for it, but then notices that she's disappeared. Meanwhile, Hoki meets Ichika by the beach, and he's frozen solid when he sees her charming swimsuit, so she tells him not to stare too much. As they sit together, Ichika says he's glad everyone is safe, but she expresses how she feels guilty for causing his injuries, so Ichika asks her to close her eyes to receive her punishment. Once she does, she flicks her on the head, and she starts scolding him for being ridiculous, until he points out that her plots are touching him, which makes her back away. However, she places his hand on her melons,
It should have been me, not him!
and asks him if he sees her as a girl, so he admits that he does. As he moves in for a kiss, the other girls suddenly arrive, fully geared up in their Stratoses, and start attacking him for cheating on them, so he runs away with Hoki. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed and watch this video on screen.